Hey everyone, Tactics here, my mythic guide to One-Armed Bandit, the 6th boss in the Liberation of Undermine raid, and a real step up in terms of overall difficulty compared to the nerfed version of the previous 5. In this video, I'll be walking you through our first kill of this boss, discussing the changes on mythic difficulty, my recommended weak auras and their setup, as well as just other tips and tricks that we learned during our progression that will hopefully help you and your guild get this boss down. Now, I will be assuming that you are familiar with the heroic mechanics for this boss, so if not, check out my guide video linked down below. Otherwise, let's talk about the two main changes this boss gets moving into mythic difficulty, where one has to do with the tank buster and the other empowers the ads. Starting with the big hit, this is the tank buster, a big hit on the tank, of course, as the name implies, but on Mythic, this also puts a circle around a random ranged player specifically, which after a few seconds will create a shocking field underneath them for the remainder of the fight. So you're gonna have a lot more area denial on Mythic, which forces you to actually use the coils, which are something you kind of ignored on normal and heroic. And these shock coils, you need to actually click them, take this big hit of physical damage, but it'll get rid of the two nearest shocking fields. So an extra thing for tanks to do because of the added circles, and range, of course, need to be aware and you need to actually identify when you have that circle on you, because there's no debuff, there's no nothing like that. You need to actually look, see that there is a circle under you because you've been picked, and move that out. It can be a little bit difficult to get used to initially, but you basically want to watch out whenever the big hit is happening. Outside of that, the other change here is that real assistants actually have this dark aligned curious ability, which is just protection from them being pushed below 25% health until they've been hit with a pay line chip. So you're going to need to be saving some of these chips and aiming them directly at some of these ads now in order to actually kill them, especially the two that you need to kill in that 30-second time frame. So these are the two the big changes moving into Mythic. Now let's talk about how you're going to actually deal with stuff in terms of weak auras. Already down here at the bottom of the One-Armed Bandit page. So Liberation of Undermine liquid pack here. This is the main one. Again, scrolling back down to One-Armed Bandit, there's a few things in terms of setup here. One, they do have a display of which one you should be doing next, and it'll pop up in text form. And in order to actually set this, you basically do this in your note using one letter to represent flame, coin, shock, and bomb here. And everyone is using a pretty similar order, actually the exact same order for this boss fight, because one kind of makes sense. That would be coin and shock first, coin and bomb second, flame and bomb third, flame and coin fourth, shock and bomb fifth, and then shock and flame sixth. We'll talk about a bit more about why in a moment, but that's kind of the order you'd want to set up using this weak aura. The Withering Flames dot, this is a range targeted dot that the real assistants put out, is a private aura. So we're back to using a macro. So you will be using a macro here to trigger when you're a ranged player with this debuff to say, hey, I've moved away from the group far enough, dispel me now. And then it highlights the healer's flames. So this can be, this is the macro you need to make. And then this is to kind of assign who should be dispelling in what priority in terms of healer dispel. So you can use that there. On top of the liquid pack, this is another boss fight where you want interrupt. So we have the interrupt anchor here, which I'm going to recommend. Again, these will be linked down in the description below. This does require a spell ID and an NPC ID for this boss fight. So here it is right here. The real assistant ID is 228463, and then the spell you're going to be interrupting is 460582. So use that in the interrupt anchor format, kind of like here that asks for the spell ID, asks for the NPC ID, and then the marker, and then you can just put your assignments in terms of who's interrupting what, where. And I recommend actually putting 2 people per interrupt. Usually these mobs are only going to get 1 interrupt off at a time, sometimes 2 if it's specifically the ad that you did not focus down to get their coin into the boss. So sometimes you'll need a second weak aura, but usually you can have like a backup person who's going to be getting that kicked, and just a lot safer and more consistent if you just assign 2 people per kick, assuming you have them. So these are the weak auras we're going to be using for this boss fight. Not a ton here, nothing super crazy in terms of the liquid pack either, just kind of reminders about stuff. There's also a coin bait reminder and a bunch of tech stuff as well, which are pretty useful in this one. So that's why I recommend it. So let's talk about comp a little bit here. We did end up using a 2 tank, 3 heal, 15 DPS. The DPS check on this boss fight is very tight. That being said, I could see you adding a fourth healer here if this boss catches a health nerf, specifically if the real assistants also catch a health nerf as well. That's potentially the first thing you could adjust, but at least as of, you know, when we killed it, which I believe was week 4 of the patch, you definitely wanted to 3 heal this to actually meet some of the DPS checks here. In terms of other things to talk about DPS checks, there are some specs that make killing the ads much easier. They're just better at it than other specs. Shadow Priest is probably the biggest one. We have 3 of them in our comp, so the more Shadow Priest you can field, the better. The other good one is a Destro lock. A lot of people are playing AF lock. The reason for that is it does really good P1 boss damage on top of being decent on the ads. That being said, I think at this point, the DPS check on the boss in P1 is totally irrelevant. And so having Destro Warlocks are better at specifically killing the 2 important real assistants. And they're also better in P2 damage. So I would recommend having Warlocks run Destro if you're having problems in terms of killing real assistants. And then finally, Dev Evoker is also pretty good at killing real assistants as well, with some positioning quirks to actually get everything cleaved properly, but still a pretty good spec. So those 3 in particular, I think, are very good on this boss fight in terms of the damage that you want to have. So something to keep in mind with your comp. The other thing is that Warlocks can actually use amplified curses on the real assistants to make their casts, specifically the interruptible cast, longer. And while this doesn't seem super powerful, the big thing is you can actually prevent them from casting their fire spell entirely, the fire debuff we were talking about with the macro, because if you delay your kick long enough and you just kill the mob before that happens, that's just 1 less. So having that is useful. Is it mandatory? I would say no. We did have 2 Warlocks applying amplified curses to 2 real assistants on our kill, but just a little tip for something that we personally did. Now, let's get into the boss fight itself here, where there's kind of a few things to talk about. We need to talk about ranged positioning because it's a really tough range fight. We need to talk about melee positioning and coin baiting, and then we need to talk about coins in general and how to handle the ads. So to start, in general for coin baiting, and this goes for pretty much everyone, we kind of want to always bait the coins through the center of the room if possible, because we want all the coins to be on like that entrance wall. And so we have the liquid pack. It tells you when to bait coins, and in general, range are going to be towards the middle of the room. Melee are going to try and point towards the middle of the room, towards the range stack, and on pull, this just puts them right down the middle. But, you know, throughout the fight, as we're moving across the room, it's going to just point them kind of in an arc along the back of the room, making it easier for your assigned coin person to actually manage them. Now, something in terms of how the coins are baited, one of them is always on a ranged player, one of them is always on a melee player. That is how the coins work, so keep that in mind. Every single spawn of coins, one is on ranged, one is on melee. So you're going to see here, we're going to bait towards the middle of the room here. I'm going to go towards middle, and again, this is fine. Like a little arc at the back of the room is totally fine. These first real assistants are totally irrelevant. And then we're going into the first ad set. Now let's start by focusing on ranged here. It's going to apply to every single ad set. A big hit is coming out. You're going to see a circle go out on a random ranged player. There is no indicator for this, like I've mentioned. It's a private aura. It's like you can't see it. One person's just going to get it. They need to identify that they got it, and they need to bring it behind them. You can see we do have a lock gate here as well behind them, so you can take the lock gate. You can get out. You can just run out if you're fast enough. Whatever works, just get this. Priority to the back left, if possible, where the lock gate is. And this just is going to work out with our coil positioning, which we'll talk about later, because we're going to want to clear mostly the ones spawned by ranged players. If you're in a terrible spot and you're like over here for some reason, and it's just easier to get to the back right, that's fine. But you want to ideally focus on dropping all these into one spot. Now, withering debuffs. This is going to go out again on random ranged players. And basically, this is going to shoot tornadoes out in a couple different potential patterns when you're dispelled. So there's no way to like aim them and have them consistently be in one spot and make a safe area. So when this happens, and it's cast usually after the overload, you see we tried to bait the kick. I don't know if we actually beat that there. I think we did actually beat that Withering Flame. Someone else did get one though. So they're going to go out and they're going to, you know, hit their macro when they're in a safe spot, and they're going to get dispelled here. And you can see they got to a spot pretty far away from the group. Dispelled, and these tornadoes are shooting away, and basically just calming if, hey, my tornado is going towards the group, range group be careful, melee group be careful, whatever it is, just so people are aware that they need to potentially look for tornadoes coming at them from behind, because these tornadoes are very, very dangerous. Especially, you know, currently they're not nerfed in any way, and they basically just one-shot you, especially if the boss has some coin stacks. So something to be aware of there. Calming this is very, very useful. And also, this kind of specific overlap is the most dangerous one for an individual player, I think, in the entire fight, where you have the flame dot and then the boss does his AoE damage with the healing absorb as well. That is when you're in the most danger. So if that happens to you, that is the perfect time to pop a personal. So that's the general range positioning for the ad phase, and for the bulk of the fight. Honestly, there's like some things that will change based on certain ad sets. We'll talk about those in a moment. Let's talk about coins. So let's rewind a bit here and show coins. So again, we're going to be baiting these coins initially. One thing I'm going to say immediately: do not get baited by trying to get giga high coin uptime in P1. It is mostly irrelevant. Honestly, it's like, in some situations it's good, specifically on ad sets where you don't have great damage in your comp. But for the most part, like I said, the P1 boss DPS check is totally irrelevant. It's not needed. You don't really need to min max the coin uptime. So don't worry about, you know, running super far, trying to get into a coin buff, and then getting crushed or something like that. In terms of who's going to actually be firing the coins, we have one assigned player for us. That is our BM Hunter. You could do any mobile range, really. Obviously, Hunters are really, really good at that, specifically BM, because they are so mobile while being able to do their damage. And so basically what would happen here is, you know, we'd have our spawn of ads, and he's going to go to the back of the room, as you can see on the mini map here, and he's going to be calling out which ads are getting coins thrown at them. He calls out every time he throws a coin in a direction towards the raid. He calls it out, and he calls out where it's going so that people are looking. Again, just like the flaming tornadoes, these coins own you. You can live if you're like a monk or a tank or something like that, but it also just stuns you for forever. So it's very, very dangerous. And that's kind of the story of this fight. There's a lot of things shooting around across the room that are trying to kill you. So having a heads up on where coins are going is good. So he's going to calm where they're going. And again, the other thing too, as you can see, I'll rewind just a few seconds here, is that the coin line, the blue line on the ground, does not extend the entire length of the coin. You can kind of see it under my damage meter here, right here. Barely see the edge of it, but the coin's going to keep going. So you need to be careful, because this it can still hit you even if you can't see the animation. Other things to note about coins hitting ads, as you see there, it does stop when it hits an ad. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you accidentally, you know, have this coin set baited on top of this ad when it still has its shield, one of the coins is going to break this shield. So you need to be careful, because something that caused a few melee deaths is if that happened at the same time as our coin person shooting it towards the ad, then the one that they shot would actually go through the mob and blow up on this wall. And that did catch some melee by surprise. So be aware of that. There's also the potential for bad coin baits. Like sometimes you bait coins, for example, there's a melee like behind the boss here, and this will bait the coin against the wall, anywhere towards the front, really. If that ever happens, our coin person was not responsible for dealing with those coins. Instead, it was the tank who was inactive, not on the boss, during the ad set, that would shoot those coins. So something to keep in mind. You need kind of a backup, and the tank is a great person to actually do that, just so that the coin person can stay towards the back of the room, and they don't need to worry about moving all the way to the front and then back to the back. Is just going to be unrealistic in terms of getting the coins hitting the mobs in a timely manner. Now, the other thing they need to watch is they do need to manage the buff stacks on the boss, because of course every single coin on the ground is a damage buff to the boss, and this is specifically very, very, very scary during that foul exhaust raid damage. Ideally, what we found is that having the boss at 2 stacks for foul exhaust was where we were trying to be. 3 is the absolute max that I would say is okay, but that is still a bunch of extra damage on the raid. And so to actually maintain the boss at 2 stacks, don't have them be above, our person would sometimes be shooting coins into walls at the back of the room if there were just too many up that they didn't need for handling the ad. So again, those wouldn't be calmed as, hey, watch out, range stack, coin coming through, or watch out, right side, left side, whatever. They would just shoot this into a wall. No one would get the buff, but we didn't need the damage buff, like I've said a few times already, because the DPS check on the boss is not super tight here. So you'd much rather make it easier to heal, because we are 3 healing, right? So again, maybe this is not something you'll worry about if you end up 4 healing later on. Maybe you'll want to try and min-max the damage buff a little bit more if you're 4 healing. But in the state of the boss currently with 3 healing, we don't care about the damage buff. We care about making the boss easier to heal. Then let's talk about tank stuff really quickly here. So basically, the first tank is always going to be the one that is placing coils and positioning the boss for bomb sets. And the second tank is going to be the one that actually controls the boss during the ad phases. As you can see here, I am the second tank. And they're also going to be the one that's always clicking the coils and taking that additional damage to actually clear stuff on the ground. Now, the biggest thing I've had questions about is how are we going to be moving the boss during the ad phase? How do you actually decide which ads you should be focusing? So let's rewind to the ads actually spawning here. And so basically our priority is always outside first. So you're going to see the ads come out here. We have a WeakAuras from the liquid pack that highlights them. And you can see here, we actually got left and right. So we got both outside ads. So this is that kind of niche case. And so first off, if it's an outside ad, we always go to it. So if it's middle and left or middle and right, we will always end up taking the boss to the left or to the right. If it's left and right like this, we always prioritize the right ad. So I'm going to be taking the boss to the right ad. Now, there are some movement adjustments to be made when you're doing a middle and a left ad. Specifically, you can drag the boss past the middle ad and then go through to the far ad during the initial part of this phase, and that allows fire mages to actually spread ignite to both ads. Obviously, you don't want to do that on this set because of just how far away the ads are, so you just prioritize immediately going to the melee ad, and then you can drag the boss towards the range ad once the melee ad is mostly dead. Now, just continuing to walk through the fight here. Again, this is going to be coin and shock first. As I mentioned, the reason for that is because you do want to immediately have some way to clear puddles, because you don't want to get overwhelmed by that by the end of the fight. And the easiest one to deal with by far is the magnet version of the coil, because it does very, very light ticking damage, and then also just pulls players in. And the neat thing you can actually do here is you can actually time the clicking of these coils with their automatic activation at 100 energy when spin to win is cast. So we're finishing off the ads here, and going off into this next phase, baiting the coins. You can see the thing did trigger here automatically. It does that when it spawns, so don't worry about that. And the automatic triggering of these does not clear anything, so you do actually need to manually click them to clear them. But be careful, this has one-shot many priests in our group that accidentally clicked the coil, so be careful. Again, the big hits are coming out, and the click timing here is basically the tank who did not get targeted by big hit, which again is usually the tank who starts second. They're going to go up to this coil, and as soon as these big hits place, I will click it, boom, to clear the 2 closest ones, and then this will go into the magnet automatically activating anyways, because the ads are spawning, so it kind of stacks them together, so you don't have too much prolonged pulling in of all players. And then we go into the ad set here, where we're going to be doing coin and bomb. You see, I drag boss for ignite, use move speed to get over to the edge. Melee is over here. We're calming coins going in. We're baiting new coins through the middle of the room to make them a bit easier for our other person to get. And again, like I said, a lot of this first phase is rinse and repeat here. Going to be killing the ads, dropping the stuff out. 8 more seconds. We are dunking. We're milking a little bit. And the big thing here, we're moving across the room, and we're going to be dunking on this side of the room with the boss facing the outside, because the bombs always spawn in front of the boss. So these are the CC immune ads, and this is important. So we're going to be kiting these ads. So it's important to bait these coins ideally together. This is actually kind of a bad bait by us, and the range basically do a bit of like a U almost, like this kind of kiting, where you bait the coins, you get your coin buff, and then you kind of curve away from these coin explosions. Again, like I said, the second explosion, actually a bad bait by us. You'd ideally want to bait that in line with the first one, but we just had to be a little bit more aggressive with our curve here and finish off all these ads with the goal of having them killed a little bit before the phase actually starts, if you can. This fixate timer you need to be careful of. If you're slow on killing them, they will refixate, so be careful here. Big hits going out, and again, same deal. I'm going to go click the coil. These are kind of far away. They pop, boom, clicked. We're going next. This next one is going to be fire and bomb. We're avoiding doing the shock here because, again, every time these ads spawn, it triggers the coils. And the other 2 coils we have are the bomb coil which is going to spawn a bunch of bomb ads every single time the ads spawn, which we don't want to deal with that. Or it's the fire coil, which spawns a bunch of one-shot tornadoes or near one-shot tornadoes whenever this boss spawns. Again, something you want to avoid. So we're saving those to the very end, instead doing literally any other combination possible, and that leaves us with fire and bomb. So again, it's going to be on the far right side here. I'm going to be moving across the room here. Another thing to keep in mind as a tank is that aggro on these real assistants is actually relevant. This electric blast is a tank targeted hit and dot. You can see when it goes out on me, it's a stacking dot, which also deals raid damage, but the initial hit's also a little bit higher than the raid damage hit. So if you have like your multi-daughters getting owned by this raid, this tank targeted hit because they have aggro on the mobs, it's going to be a bit excessive in terms of damage intake. So something we learned very, very early on is that tanks need to make sure that they are getting aggro on all these mobs. And so things like Divine Toll early on, if it's up, is great. Things like me starting by hitting the middle guy and then moving to one side with the boss. And then on top of that, at the same time, our warrior tank would go and hit the far ad a little bit to actually make sure that he had aggro on that one, just to make things a little bit more consistent in terms of reducing the overall damage going out on our group. So again, we're going to move to one side. We're going to dunk here. This is going to be the fire bombs. This is pretty important because this is one where it potentially alters our positioning in the ad phase, because these are going to die. And then when they die, these are going to then blow up and shoot out tornadoes everywhere. And the big thing, again, these tornadoes, as you just saw, this one go out and then come back in, they will converge back onto their initial position. So very, very dangerous if these ads die near this ad and then this ad gets chosen. So melee will just avoid that ad if that is the case. If it's not the case, obviously you don't need to worry about it. The other thing too, in general, when avoiding tornadoes, just remember, again, it will always converge back on the same initial position. So if you are safe dodging the tornadoes going out, that same spot is safe coming back in. So you don't need to adjust your positioning. These ads can be CC'd, so using things like ROP, Binding Shot, Ursals, whatever to get them dead. And then again, same hit, big hits going out. I'm clicking the coil, we're getting pulled in. You can see you see it middle and left here. I'm going to call melee is middle. So melee is now going to be middle. Range is going to make sure that they are hard hitting the other ad. Again, usually range would be this middle one and we would be the outside one. But in this case, because of specifically the fire tornadoes, we are ignoring that specifically. Again, coins are being shot out by our coin man. He's shooting them all. He's calming, hey, coins are coming middle, coins are coming left, coins are coming right. Be very, very careful. Make sure you are watching this. It gets very chaotic, as you can see. People are getting big hits. People are getting targeted by the flame tornadoes. Tornadoes are already existing, right? So there's a lot going on here, and it's very, very, very easy to die. So you need to be on the lookout, specifically if you're ranged as well, because you guys are the ones being targeted by big hit, being targeted with the tornadoes and that kind of stuff. Melee is mostly just coin baiting and avoiding tornadoes, so they don't have to deal with the big hit stuff. So there's a lot going on here, and you need to keep an eye out always. Continuing on, this is going into our flame and coin, which is specifically our one of our weak ad sets. So again, in our comp, weak ad sets we found were ad set 2 and ad set 5, which is this one we're going to be going into after this. And so to actually handle that, what we decided to do was pot ad set 2, because that was around a minute 10 and our lust is around 6:10. So that would actually line up our pot with lust. So that's totally fine. A pot ad set 2. Ad set 5, which is what we're going to go into. We just decided we were just going to tunnel getting the coin buff going into this phase. So this coin buff goes out. A little bit hard to see. You see we're stacking like darkness. We got barrier going out because it's basically a ton of raid damage in the dot into healing absorb. So lots of healing CDs stacked here. We get this coin buff. And then we are going to immediately go into these ad sets where we can then chain the next coin buff in this phase. And so getting this initial coin buff and then getting the next coin buff in this phase for us was the most important thing, because this was always the ad set that we were struggling with the most. Accidental taunt to the boss there. It's okay. We get it back. And we're going to the, again, middle and right. So we're going to be now tunneling. That middle ad got absolutely owned because of what happened there, but that's okay. We just hard tunnel this left ad and get it down, and we're going to like dunk it at the last second. Also, talking on dunking at the last second, basically, sometimes it's a little bit finicky, and where like you need to dunk with like over half a second left for it to actually register sometimes. So if you're milking the dunk at 1, don't try and dunk less than 1. Just to make sure you do actually get it, because those wipes where you've killed the ad sets in time, you're doing well, and then you just have a fraudulent thing because someone dunked late, those always feel the worst. In terms of who is dunking, we always had a couple melee that were staying behind on the melee ad if we ever moved the boss early, and they were assigned to make sure they were dunking that, as well as just, you know, mobile people in general that obviously are not our hunter who's running around shooting coins, are responsible for that. So having a few assigned players to be dunking is pretty good, but everyone needs to be aware of the situation if they accidentally pick one of these coins up from the ground and be ready to dunk it quickly. So that's that. You can see the bomb was placed directly at the center of the room here where the boss spawns. That's where the bomb coil is. Groups up all these ads up here at the start, and also we'll group them up under the boss at the start of phase 2, because phase 2 will also auto trigger all of these pylons every single time the boss reaches 100 energy. Now, the initial spawn of these bombs, not super bad. As you can see, we're just kind of like binding a shockwave, cleave them down. The next one is where it's annoying, because you will have one singular set of real assistance where you have to deal with the actual bombs at the same time. About to come up here. So again, oil, and now is our last one, which is going to be flame and shock. So here's the real assistance. This is mostly going to be handled by multi-daughters. We're going to lock them down in the middle of the room. We have Ursul's out on the pack. We're going to have AoE stuns eventually as well. Ring of Pieces, just to keep them in the middle of the room here, while everyone else is tunneling real assistance. We do not need to kill these. We need to keep them away from us while we are killing the important mobs that are limited by 30 seconds. So that is the priority here. The bombs are not the priority. Multi-daughters kill them. Multi-daughters kill them. That's great. Again, people coming in, making sure they get the dunk. Boom, dunk. And this is shock and flame, and you can see this one gets dropped deep in the corner here. And again, this is for P2 because it's going to shoot out flame waves during P2 that we really want to avoid. And so how we handle this, and how, you know, many other guilds handle this, is they drop this coil on the far right side, and then they play on the left side where we've been clearing with our other coil in phase 2. So that is the big thing there. Going into phase 2, we actually have a bit of a slow push here because we had some deaths and battle reses. Basically, when you'd want to push is shortly after this coin set. You'd basically want to try and get this coin buff and then immediately phase the boss. So we were a little slow on DPS on this pull specifically. Like, usually we've had to hold DPS a little bit here. Oh yeah, be careful. Make sure you try not to get hit by tornadoes. And then, so this is now going into phase 2. The boss auto phases at 30%, or when he does this stage 2 transition, hitting 100 energy for the, 7th time, I guess, after you've done all the different ad combinations. And it's important you do not immediately lust here, because like I said, we've been focusing our damage to making sure that we are killing ad sets in time. And so this does mean that our 2 minutes are slightly delayed. So you don't want to immediately lust on the transition here. As you see, that was around 5:30. You want to lust shortly after 6 minutes because our 2 minutes are a bit delayed. You also saw us trigger this magnet on the start of the phase here. You can wait for the actual auto trigger, which happens after Rig the Game is done, but as you can see here, it's not really doing much to us. A very light pull in. And then this is the auto trigger, and we are up at the front here to bait our first coil of this phase, because this is random target baited right near the front of the room to allow us to have the ability to kind of bait along and move the boss along this way. Now, why did we click this coil? It's just to make sure that we had enough safe space here. If we had any bad drops that were potentially blocking our positioning and our movement in this phase, you can use this to clear them. You can even continue to clear it during this phase whenever the boss reaches 100 energy if needed, but usually it's fine unless you have a really bad drop. So again, AoE stuns here on these bombs to get them killed. We get a good drop of the coil there. And the big thing is positioning in this phase. So the coil always knocks literally everyone away from the spawn. So you need to position such that you aren't going to get roasted by the coil, especially if the boss moves, because the tank is also getting knocked. Also, you need to be aware of when there's multiple coils down. So every other coil from now on, you also need to make sure you're not knocked into this coil beam, because on Mythic, these are basically one-shots. We're going to be baiting these coins here, and this is basically just we're moving along the left side of the room here, kind of around the room, trying to fill in the room that we aren't going to use with these big hits if you are able to. You see, I'm going to tank it, go around the hypercoil, drop it over here. We drop it in these places. We're never going to be here again. Next coil drops. We honestly could have baited this a little bit closer to the boss. Not a big deal. We're going to, again, get knocked away and continue pulling the boss such that the coils are behind the boss. Then comes the beams. Beams here, they're going to be off to the left side. That has always been our rule, is that the raid in general is moving downwards this way, as you can see. So if you get beams, you move to the left side of the boss and you point them over here safely away. You can see bear form there. It's painful, so make sure you have a defensive if you're the beam target, because it does overlap with a foul exhaust. Again, these are going out. Try and drop it where we're not going to be going. We have at the same time, we have a coil dropping down. So it's a very fast phase. There's a lot happening and you need to be able to quickly adjust. At the same time, we're going to bake coins here. It's going to be right near us. So we need to be ready to actually move here, get the coin buff, and then move away from the wall where this is going to explode. Very, very scary. At the same time, your coin person still needs to be out here shooting these coins away from your group, because there's going to be the ramping damage on the boss, and you don't want this boss to have like 4 stacks of this buff in this phase. That is a big no-no. So you want to make sure that you are still at least clearing those coins with your mobile ranged DPS. Here, again, being so far away from these fires, they're a lot easier to avoid. We are starting to get near them because we've rotated around most of our space, so keep in mind. We're also going to have more bombs coming from this the pylons. This is our 3rd set of bombs. Basically, it's going to trigger his pylons 3 total times in this phase. 1 at the start, 1 halfway through, 1 right near the end. So this is the one near the end where, again, the second one and the third one, we basically just kind of keep them slowed, maybe little roots if you wanted. And then our multi-daughters are kind of funneling boss damage off of these bombs into the boss, where the melee just entirely ignore them. So these are basically dead and nowhere near us, right? They're just giga slowed, they're getting stunned, whatever. Multi-daughters are owning them, and then we are focusing the boss here. And you can see the coins as well. I think our coin thrower was out doing stuff during the coins after this. You can see them at the top of the room here, with the coins going over, kicking the coin into the walls, right? These ones are not relevant. They're not worth murdering people. We've talked about how there's so much going on here during this phase. You want to get the coin buff from the boss, but the coin buff from the shooting the coins back is very, very, very dangerous. So while it is important in the tight DPS check, it's not worth crushing someone in your raid. It just makes it a lot harder, especially if you're getting to this boss later on in the season. You got more gear than us. You've got more stacks of the damage amp buff, where we only have 1 stack right now. It's going to more than make up for the fact that you don't get the 2nd stack of the coin buff. So do your best to get the first one, but don't worry about the second one so much. From here, the Enrage is basically the 5th hypercoil. After the 4th hypercoil, the boss just goes to full energy and starts casting Explosive Jackpot. So boom, there's that last knockback. Be very, very careful. That's the 5th one that spawns. And then he does that cast. And then if you beat that cast, the boss is dead. So hopefully this video helps you out, guys. If it did, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like it, including Mythic guides to both Muggsy and Galio coming very, very soon, dungeon guides for players looking to push for the 0.1% title, and much more. As always, I need to give a massive thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon for making content like this possible, and I'll see everyone in the next video.